If your child has an imaginary friend, you may not want to watch this. Do not say I did not warn you. Now, in 2003, Jacob and his wife have a little girl. Their first child was a little boy, and he had always been a special little kid. Now, during this time, they rented a house in their price range. They loved this house. It had a beautiful yard. It was a brick home. It had a finished basement. There was one demand of the landlord, though, that was a little suspicious. There was a door in the basement that was connected to a room that they called the office, and this door had like padlocks and locks all over it. And the landlord just told them, like, listen, you can use the entire house. I don't care, but I have one demand of you, and that is do not ever open that door. The landlord did, however, promise that there was nothing sinister about this, that he was just keeping his personal belongings there, like his storage there, which get a storage unit, but whatever. Things were great for the first year. Their son was 2 years old though, so he was moving around quite a bit. Now, shortly after he turns 2 and he's moving around the house a lot, he starts talking to somebody that isn't there. And every time his mom and dad ask him, who are you talking to? And he always says, my friend Jimmy. Now, Jimmy was really important to him. No matter where he was or what he was doing, Jimmy always had a place where he was. As time went on though, things changed a little bit. It seemed as though their son was starting to fear Jimmy. He started to not want to play in his room, and when his parents would ask why, he would say that Jimmy was mean and that Jimmy was scaring him. Now, a couple weeks go on of him being afraid of Jimmy and them having to kind of like veer around issues about Jimmy, when all of a sudden he starts acting a little bit strange. He starts doing things that were out of the ordinary for him. He's getting into trouble a lot. And when his parents would ask him, why are you suddenly doing these things? You know they're wrong. He would say, so that I don't make Jimmy mad. Things, unfortunately, would take a turn for the worse. After he started doing these things that were getting him into trouble, his mom and dad started noticing that there was little bruises all over him and also bite marks. And when they would ask Timmy, who is doing this to you? But as soon as they would ask him this question, that he would start to freak out and he'd be like, I'm not supposed to tell you. Jimmy is going to get so mad at me. I'm not supposed to tell you. Just absolutely terrified. Well, this starts getting so bad that Timmy won't sleep in his room anymore. And one day, Jacob and his wife are in the living room and they're just talking about how they need to get a clergy in there or someone to bless the home, when suddenly they hear this loud crash and they just hear glass break. Now, this is coming from Timmy's room. So they walk into his room to see what the hell is going on. And there's this picture that is on the wall, but it's not on the wall. It's resting on a shelf. And this shelf has rails around it. And then the picture itself is nailed to the wall on top of the rails being around it. This picture had flown off of the wall past Timmy's bed and crashed on the middle of the floor. And this was a picture of Timmy, their son. And there was no way that this could have just fallen off. There's no way it could have made the distance that it made across his bed, especially with it having rails around it and being nailed to the wall and then also flying over his bed. There was just no way. So at this point, they have had enough. And they're like, we need to call a pastor or a priest or someone. So they call a pastor and a prayer group to come to the house so that they can bless the house. Now, the evening before this pastor and the prayer group were supposed to come to their house, his wife and the son are at home alone. And this is where it just gets bad. So his wife decides that she's going to give Timmy a bath. So she runs the warm water and then she puts all of his toys in the bath and then she puts Timmy inside of the bath. She's kind of sitting on her knees. She turns off the water and her son was talking to her, when suddenly she notices that her son just stops talking and looks directly past her. She says at this point that she suddenly just got this overwhelming feeling of dread and the room just turned ice cold. Well, he then looks down, starts playing with his toys again, and then he just looks back up like this and looks past her again and then just yells, Jimmy, leave us alone. So at this point, his wife is scared and she just looks at her son and she just says, is Jimmy behind me, Bubby? And Timmy just goes, oh, I just got chills. So she slowly turns around and right behind her is this see-through apparition of this little boy peeking around the door frame. Except for this was no ordinary little boy. His hair was soaked. He had long teeth and his eye sockets were empty. She screams, grabs her son, runs out of the house, and will not go back into that house until it is blessed. So the prayer group and the clergy come to bless the house, the priest, and as soon as they come and they start praying and doing their thing, this putrid smell comes over the air and the whole energy of the entire house just shifts to darkness. But after that, no more Jimmy. Now, they never did open that door, but they always wondered what was behind it. They believed this was not a little boy, but a creature portraying itself as one, hurting their son. It's now almost 2026, so that is almost 23 years ago, and all these years later, as an adult, Timmy still remembers Jimmy, but refuses to talk about him. So what did you guys think about that story? I don't know what it was about that story. I still have chills on my entire body. I'm not even joking you. That freaked me out. Do not like kid ghosts. You guys already know this, but that was not a ghost. That you're hurting a child. I think that's a demon. No doubt in my mind that is some type of demon, because ghosts don't harm children. Or at least I don't think that they do. I mean, that takes a special type of evil, in my opinion. So I personally think that this was a demon, and I think that poor little boy, for whatever reason, I got the brunt of whatever was behind that door, because it is a little weird to me that why have a room in somebody's home that they can't go in? Like, number one, they're paying rent. So how are you going to tell them that they can't go into a part of their room? I guess if you're cutting that portion off of the rent, that's fine, right? It is the landlord's home after all. But generally speaking, it depends on what state you're in. But in New York State, yeah, we would be able to go in that room. You can't tell us that we can't. If your valuables are that important, why are they kept in a stranger's home? Like, you don't know if those people are going to open that door. I don't know. That whole thing is weird to me. What do you guys think about that portion of the story? I would love to know your thoughts on that portion of the story, because it does sound like that may be kind of correlated. But with that being said, I'm just glad that he is okay today, and that was all stopped, and that child stopped being, oh my God, that reminds me of a dream I had last night. So my dogs, as you guys know already, are literally my pride and joy. I love them with all my heart. And I know this is not the same thing as a child, but like, the love I have for my dogs is truly so unconditional. And I had a dream last night that Leo, my dog, well, one of them, was being harmed by a demon. And I couldn't stop it from happening because I didn't know how to stop. You can't stop something invisible from harming like someone you love. And I can imagine that that's how they felt. So that's super, and it was such a horrible dream. I've thought about it literally like for like the first 5 to 6 hours of today. I thought about this dream, and the fact that I just put this 2 and 2 together is super weird that I got this story tonight. Again, I know it's not the same thing as having a kid, but I still love them so much, and I would be heartbroken. Drop all your thoughts, opinions, and suggestions in the comments, but as always, please be respectful.
I grew up in a haunted house, and I talk about things that I've seen throughout my life and that my family and friends have also seen, and then I also tell stories about followers, but this one is a personal story, and it's about my imaginary friend that ended up not being imaginary. This is the photo that my mom sent me. This is the one that was taken in the 80s. This is probably like 1981, but you can already see her in the photo. She's right here. You can see her, but I'm going to show you a little bit better because I also took this photo. I lightened it up. You can see her right here. And this is her shoulder. This is the little fringe on her dress. This is her braid that runs through there. See her? Yikes. I blocked myself out, so everything that's in the white area is her. You can see her jawline, her little ear, her hair, her dress, the braid laying across the front of her, and the fringe on her dress. Now I'm doing it this way so that if I hold it farther back, you guys can see it, because I think you want to hold it too close sometimes. Up was located on the Trail of Tears, and one day we were watching Peter Pan, like from the 50s or something, and Mom said that when Tiger Lily came on, I said, oh look, there's Susan. And she said it never really added up because Susan doesn't sound like a Native American name, and it may not be. And that's another thing that I'm hoping, if you see this video, why would I have said that her name was Susan? But I said that she had, I would go like this and say that she had these on her dress, which you can see in the photo, the fringe that's on her dress. She had long braids, and I would want my hair braided like hers. Let me show you. This is another photo of me and Susan. Apparently Susan was sitting beside me, but you can't see her in this photo. I'm 5 here. This is my 5th birthday, so I was in kindergarten, even though I don't look it, but I was small. But she's supposed to be in this photo too, but you can't see her. Okay, here's a zoomed in. This is my ear right here. But this right here starts the bottom of her jaw. Okay, and it goes up through here and move back out. See it? This is her braid right here. This is where the fringe is on her dress that I would tell my mom about. This is her shoulder. You can't not see her. Even strangers found her at Walmart. So What do you guys think? I'm so excited for this find, and I'm actually going to pick up Carter now, and then we're going to go over to my mom's house and look through old photos, because if that picture's there, there's probably a lot more, and maybe even some of Miss Pike. So I'm going to dig through family photos tonight and see how many more ghosts I can find.
The plot has thickened with my imaginary friend Joe drama. So if you're new here, we just moved into a deceased estate and my daughter has an imaginary friend named Joe. And we've spoken to the neighbors and the kids of the couple that lived here and learnt enough to think that maybe Joe is not so imaginary. So a new player has entered the chat. I don't quite know what to make of this, but I was talking to my daughter the other night and we were down here, which is where she normally plays with Joe. So she's still playing with him all the time. She seems happy, like everything's fine. I'm just like, okay, cool, you do you, all good. But we were downstairs and we were pulling out these books and I was going to read her a book before she went to bed. And one was about being nervous and we were walking up the stairs and she goes, oh, you know, Joe gets nervous sometimes. And I was like, oh, what does Joe get nervous about? And she said, John. He gets nervous about John. And I was like, who the fuck is John? And I'm like, okay, who's John? And she goes, oh, he comes here sometimes. He's really mean to Joe and he's really mean to me. And I was like, okay, where does John live? And she said, he lives next door, but he comes here sometimes. And I caught the tail end of this on camera, so I will play it after I do this. And she said, oh, Joe tells me to ignore him. Or Joe tells me not to listen to him. And I was like, okay, great. Like, okay, what do I do now? I feel like I'm at the point where I need to just waft a whole bunch of sage through here. Because I have enough of my own dramas, let alone having ghosts in the house that have their own beef. I don't have any time for that. And I just could not imagine anything worse than living somewhere and hating your neighbor and then dying, and then that neighbor dies and you are stuck living together again in the afterlife. F that. I will play the little snippet that I got of her on video now. Who's John?
He's the person that really mean to me.
He's really mean to you? Where does he live?
He lives in the teacher's house. But don't listen to them anymore.
Okay.
On August 29th, 2001, 6-year-old Haley Zega goes on a hike in the Ozark National Forest with her grandparents. They had originally planned on hiking down to this waterfall, but Haley wasn't super fond of the outdoors. She's 6 years old. She's starting to get kind of tired and grumpy. It was getting kind of late at this point, and the grandparents decide to start heading back. But Haley ends up pitching a fit, and she sits down on a rock, and she said she wasn't moving unless her grandparents carried her. So the grandparents decide to do like the quick, okay, fine, and they pretend to walk off, and Haley did decide to start following them after this, but because she was so tired, she would often stop a lot along the trail. So she was walking and then she'd stop a lot, and the grandparents decide that at one point they're going to walk a little bit ahead of her and just kind of wait for her to catch up. They were pretty much watching her though the entire time. But in just the few moments that the grandparents had decided to walk ahead, they would lose sight of Haley. Haley says that she could not see or hear them anymore, and she just remembers walking through dense forest. Haley kept walking until she came to a split in the trail, and she decides to go down one side of this trail, hoping that it would lead her to her grandparents. But this trail just ended up taking her further into deeper and deeper woods, and soon Haley realized she really was lost. On the first day that she was lost, Haley finds the Buffalo River, which she's hoping will lead her back to civilization, so she hatches a plan that she's going to follow this river. Now, at this point, there was a massive search and rescue effort underway to look for Haley. In fact, it was the largest in Arkansas history. Haley could even see the helicopters flying overhead, and she would prop herself up on the rocks by the river, hoping that they would see her, but they never did. On the second and third days, Haley is still trying to follow the river. She's getting hungrier, she's getting more thirsty. Obviously, she was scared to actually drink from the river because it might be contaminated, and she's screaming her name. She's doing everything she can to hope that someone will find her and notice where she is. Finally, towards the end of the third day, Haley was found by two men on horseback. These men weren't actually part of the official search party, but they knew the area really well, and when they went to the official search party to tell them, hey, you might want to look in this area, their request was denied because they didn't believe Haley could have actually gotten this far. So they didn't want to waste resources looking for her in areas they didn't think she could possibly be. So thankfully, these men decided to search there anyways, and they did find Haley. Now, when Haley was questioned about what happened to her while she was in the woods, she told everyone that she had been fine because she had her imaginary friend Alicia with her the entire time. Now, people thought maybe this was a coping mechanism, but Haley said that this imaginary friend would play games with her, they sang songs, and Alicia would even help Haley trek down the 200-foot bluffs to make sure she could get back to the river. And these would have been difficult for an adult, much less a child. When people started looking into this imaginary friend story, they realized that there actually had been a little girl named Alana, which is pretty similar to Alicia, who had gone missing in the same area 23 years prior. Alana was 4 years old, she had black hair and brown eyes, and this is exactly as Haley described Alicia. Haley said that this little girl was with her from the moment she got lost until the moment she was found, and she had never had an imaginary friend before or after that. So I'm curious if you guys think maybe this was really all just a coping mechanism, or was this Alicia spirit a guardian angel, or maybe a ghost? Was she some sort of spirit guide? Haley is now an adult, and she has shared her story several times before on YouTube.
All right, y'all, this story is from Alabama. Come on. Now, this woman says that she can remember a friend that she had when she was probably about 5 years old. She said the memory came up because her mom pulled out all of these old photos. And when she pulled out all the old photos, she was like, oh, well, what happened to that girl that I used to hang with all the time when I was that age? So she said that after she said that, her mom looked at her and was just like, girl, please, you barely had friends. You had your cousins. That's pretty much it. So she told the mom, like, no, I remember she used to go everywhere with me. She used to go to Gam's house with me, her grandmother. And she said, and we used to go to the park. She just started naming off all these things that they used to do together. She said that her mom turned white and was just like, well, can you remember her name? And so she was like, yeah, I remember it started with an H. So the mom, pretty much looked like she was a little calmer. And she was just like, she thought that was weird because at first she looked like she had just seen a ghost. Now, her father has since then passed away. And so she wasn't able to ask him questions or anything about the girl that she knew she used to hang with when she was 5. But fast forward to, she went over her aunt's house with her cousins. Now, they're all grown now, and they're all just talking and chatting away, drinking a little bit. And she said that everybody, started talking about childhood. And she was like, hey, y'all remember that girl that used to come with me all the time when we were younger? And she used to come with me to grandma's house. And she said her cousins was just like, no, you didn't have friends. You had us. So she said that she ended up watching this movie with her cousins. It's supposed to be a scary movie, but she said she was watching this movie with her cousins, and it's called Imaginary. So she said that while she was watching it, she was just like, was that an imaginary friend? It pretty much sparked some interest, and she was just like, I've got to figure this out. So she said that she started digging around. She knew that her family were pack rats, so they never got rid of stuff. So she said that when she went back home to her parents' house, she said that she went to the attic and she also went to the basement and started searching around in boxes to try to look for all the paintings and things that her and her friend did together. Now, she said when she started to look, she felt like somebody was watching her, but she knew that nobody else was there, so she ignored it because she knew that everybody else was still at her aunt's house. So then she said she started to find some paintings and, handprints and stuff. The handprints that you do when you're younger. She said she found some, and she found the name Haley on a couple of them. Now, she said when she confronted her mom about it, her mom pretty much was just like, look, you wrote all those things. You had an imaginary friend. There, wasn't a real person that was your friend. So long story short, she said that her mom and dad sent her to talk to someone because they thought that it was a little odd that she still had this imaginary friend at such a large age. They said that she was 11. So she still had that friend at the age of 11. Pretty much she said that she was 5 years old and she can, remember her all the way up to that age 11 when her parents sent her to talk to a specialist because they thought that something was wrong with her. So she said that ever since she's pretty much brought this up, and she said she took a couple of those paintings home with her that she found that had Haley's name on it. And she said ever since then, it always feels like someone is playing in her hair. Little things get moved around. And she pretty much was just like, I'm thinking that my imaginary friend was a ghost. But now she says she can't get rid of it. She said that things happen when she has company. She can't explain it to her company because she has the kind of friends that don't believe in that kind of stuff. So she said that she knows if she mentions it, they'll think she's nuts. So she said the latest thing that happened is she said the spirit won't allow any of her friends to come over. And when her friends do come over, they pretty much leave regretting it. She said that the past couple days, literally a couple days ago, she said that she had a friend stay over. They were in town and they wanted to visit. She said that the friend stayed over at her apartment and she said that it felt like somebody was pinching her. And you could see the red marks all over her arm. So then she said, lately she's been having a nightmare and she can't seem to stop having the same nightmare over and over again. And she said that in the nightmare, she can see a little girl being choked. And she said that it looks like a man's hands choking this little girl in her dream. She said that she thinks it is Haley and Haley is trying to show her how she passed away. That's probably why your mom didn't want you to, bring up old stuff, because now look, you done took something home with you from your parents' house. And I understand, everybody gets that itch, where they like, oh, I just got to investigate more. But you probably should have left that one alone, baby. You need to let Haley know that she cannot stay at your house, that she has to go. Unless you want her there, terrorizing your guests. I mean, I wouldn't. But let her know that she has to go. She cannot be there, and you need to say it with conviction so that she can leave. Because what's next is she's going to want you all to herself. That's never good.
This is an allegedly true paranormal story time about an imaginary friend of someone's husband who was jealous of her when they started dating. I had an imaginary friend when I was growing up. Her name was Charlene. Luckily, have not seen her as an adult, but this woman named Christy wrote in, and she says that when she started dating her husband, he was in the military and he was deployed overseas, but she moved into his house. He was still going to be gone for a couple of months after she moved in, which meant she was going to be there for a little while by herself. And after she moved in, she had this kind of just creeped out feeling in the house, although she didn't experience anything directly. It was just this overwhelming sense of feeling watched, especially when she was in the bedroom upstairs. But Chrissy didn't want to say anything to her man about it when they talked. They had other more important things to talk about it. He was still overseas, and she just attributed it to being in this new house by herself. They were also very early on in their relationship, so she didn't want to say anything that would make him think that she was crazy. But he gets back from deployment, and then she starts having these creepy nightmares. These nightmares would almost start as sleep paralysis, where she would feel like she woke up in bed, turn her head to look, and next to the bed would be a little girl standing that was very pale with short dark hair. And she looked normal at first, but always in these dreams, this girl would end up lunging at Christy, and she had these jagged, sharp teeth. She said she had this nightmare about once a week, and she didn't know why, because she didn't know anybody in real life that looked like this little girl. She didn't like horror movies and didn't watch them. And she didn't think she was dreaming of herself as a child because she didn't look like that. But eventually she would have this dream so much that it started to visibly move her. And her husband would wake her up and say, "You're crying, you're moaning in your sleep. What is going on?" After one of these dreams, when he woke her up, she was so horrified that she decided she had to tell him. So the next day when they were out of the house, she said she didn't want to bring it up in the house because she didn't want to feed this thing any energy in case it was something real. She just asked him, like, "Hey, have you ever had anything strange happen in the house? Because I feel watched. I've had these horrible nightmares and I don't know what's going on." And they get to talking, and he tells her that he's actually lived in some older turn-of-the-century houses growing up, but that he hadn't had anything super creepy happen in the house that they were living in now. She starts asking him about the houses that he grew up in and did he ever have any experience with ghosts or spirits. And he says no, but I actually did have an imaginary friend, and this piqued her interest. She thought it was cute, and she was like, oh, what was your imaginary friend like? And he was like, oh, she was this little girl. She was pale. She had short dark hair, and she had jagged teeth. Christy said when he said that, she felt like crying because she knew this was the little girl in her dreams, and she's pressing him for more details. And he said, no, she wasn't scary. We just played together in my dad's house that I grew up in. He says, you know, it was just typical imaginary friend. We played together, but as I got older, she just kind of faded away. So Christy tells him, I think I'm dreaming of her. And he says, no, it's got to be just the stress from your job or seasonal depression. Something is going on. You're not dreaming about my imaginary friend. So Christy agrees. She's like, you're probably right. But then the paranormal activity around their house started. She said things would go missing, keys would show up in weird places, doors would randomly open and close on their own. Another thing they noticed happening in their house at this time was their perishables would rot within a few days. She would buy unripe, like bananas and produce, and within 2 days they would be black and moldy. Her husband was insistent that nothing paranormal was going on, but one night they were asleep and he woke her up and he said, Christy, do you see that? He motions to the dresser and she looks, and they see things being moved around almost by an invisible force. There was no one around to do it. As they're watching these things move around without explanation on their dresser, they hear a loud bang on their door 3 times. This freaked Christy out so much she jumped up out of bed and she said, we have to go sleep in the spare room. I'm not sleeping in here. So they move all their stuff and they start sleeping in the spare room from that night forward. From that night on, as they slept in the spare bedroom, they would hear footsteps on the floor above them, seemingly walking around the bathroom, down the hallway, stomping at certain points. It was relentless, and neither of them were getting any sleep. So finally, Christy's husband said he was going to talk to his mother, who's a very spiritual person. And she came to the conclusion that this little girl, this imaginary friend he had when he was growing up, had attached herself to him and was getting jealous of Christy because this was his first long-term relationship. They weren't married at the time, but they were getting very, very serious. And his mother was convinced that this little girl had grown hostile toward Christy because she was taking up her space. She instructed Christy and her husband to smudge the house, wipe vinegar on the door frames and the window frames, to cleanse the space and acknowledge the spirit and tell it was not welcome, which they did. She says from that point forward, the activity stopped. Even their produce stopped rotting as fast as it had, and they had never experienced anything again in that house. I'm going to send Christy the link to this video so she can read the comments, but let us know if you've had an imaginary friend or if you think there's anything to that with the paranormal or the supernatural, or if it's just a figment of imagination like so many children think. If you have a spooky scary story time, I would love to hear it. I try to post a new one almost every single day.
How do you know if an imaginary friend is actually just imaginary or is it astral? So in 2018, Claire and her family moved to a new house. It's an old house built in the 1900s. What's creepy is right away, her little sister, who was 7 at the time, says, hey, there's a little girl here. Her name is Hannah. The entire family thought it was just an invisible friend, but now they're really not so sure. So things started to get weird. She would ask her little sister, hey, do you want to play a game today? And her little sister would say, sorry, I can't. I'm playing with Hannah. Creepy. One day Claire had a friend over, and they wanted to use a spirit box. And I personally really don't like spirit boxes. I think they're like Ouija boards. I don't think that you should yell into the darkness, hello, and expect light to come through. But that's just me. Nevertheless, they actually said they didn't have success with the spirit box, and were not connecting with any entities. However, Claire and her friend did do something when the spirit box was working. They started taunting Hannah. They started calling Hannah names. And later that night, they went to the lounge, and while they were sitting there, the lounge lights went out. Creepy. When Claire went to sleep that night, she said she was woken up by a young girl who was dressed in clothing from the 1900s. Now, she saw this little girl multiple times, and assumed that little girl was Hannah. When she was sitting at her desk, she would feel something stroking her hair. Other family members started experiencing paranormal things, and they moved to a new house. Except it was also an old house, and I guess it was also haunted, because right when they got there, the little sister said, hey, y'all, Hannah's here too. And it was at that point in time that the parents came out and hired a priest to cleanse the place. Within a month, Claire says that the energy returned to normal, but hasn't been able to shake this feeling that something might still be following her. That is an insane story. It's hard when you're talking to a child, when they start talking about something. You don't want to be like, hey, is that a demon under your bed? But it can get really creepy really quickly. Did you ever have an invisible friend? Let me know in the comments below.
I've gotten a lot of questions about this. I do assume that, like, the little girl is my sister's imaginary friend, but I don't know if it presented itself to my sister as a little girl. When my sister would talk about her imaginary friend, she called it pedo, and we've looked at the name, the meaning, the spelling. We've tried spelling it backwards. Like, we can't find anything. But whenever she'd talk about any imaginary friend, even if it was a different one than she was previously talking about, she gave them all the same name. So like, you know, we really don't think that's very relevant. One time me and my sister were walking down the stairs and she, to herself, said, "That's not very nice." And I was like, who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? What's going on? I don't like it. I don't like it when children start talking to shit that's not there. Absolutely not. Bonkers. That's unwell. So when she did that, I was already freaked out. And she said, "Pedo told me to push you down the stairs." And I'm sitting there like, ha ha ha, so funny. Such a funny joke. What the fuck? What the fuck? I was like, oh, thanks for not listening to him. I used to have horrible nightmares. I still do. Sometimes if I have nightmares of like anything demonic, it's always in this house. Like, it's never in the house I'm living in, never in one of my other houses that were haunted. That house. And they're horrible. But I used to have a reoccurring nightmare that my sister was possessed and killed our whole family. It was really horrible and gruesome, and essentially I like knew something was wrong, ran into my parents' room to try to like wake them up, and I like flipped them over and they were deceased, throat slit, very bad. And I would like scream and run out into the hallway to get the rest of my family, and my sister would be looking at me with like completely pitch black eyes and just grinning, and I remember having to like hold her back, like by her head, like hold her back away from me because she was trying to get to me. Terrifying. I woke up and was immediately like, I have to go check on my sister, and I did. Totally fine. But like, I would have this dream repeatedly. I don't think there was ever like possession with her. Like, I don't think she was ever possessed at any given point, but I do think she was like encouraged by her friend to like do stuff, like when she faked dead, or like when she would like say certain stuff. I was like, who, like, where did you hear that from? And she'd be like, Pedo told me. Unwell, absolutely unwell. I'm gonna see if she wants to make a video with me of just her talking about like what she remembers and her experience in the house. So if you guys want to see that, comment down below, let her know that you want to see it, because then she'll probably do it.
Or what about this case from the UK? This is about a woman called Rachel. Now, Rachel is a successful lawyer with her own legal consultancy firm in a place called Berkshire in England. Now, one night, she was putting her 4-year-old to bed. This was a little boy called Thomas. But she said as she did that, Thomas started to talk about, quote, a man in the room. Rachel couldn't see anything, but her son kept pointing to an empty spot next to her, saying, no, he's right there. He's standing right next to you, look. Now, Rachel was understandably a little bit concerned, but she just shrugged it off as just an imaginary friend. And so she tried an experiment. She said to him, well, look, Thomas, all right, there is a man standing here. But she said, but me and this man think you should go to sleep now. So we're going to go off and we're going to have a cup of tea. And she thought that might be the end of it. But Thomas said that this mysterious man kept coming back to see him. And so he started to draw pictures of this man. He was bald with thick rimmed glasses. Now, this all went on for a while, and the family just played along with it, not necessarily recognizing this description of whoever this person was, until a couple of years later when she and Thomas were at Rachel's father's house. They were looking through some old photographs since Rachel was researching the family's history. And she and the father turned up an old picture of her paternal grandmother. And she was standing next to her second husband. Now, bear in mind that Rachel had barely known this man and had no photographs of him at all. But Thomas happened to be in the room at the time and came over and became greatly animated. He said, that's him! That's the man, Mummy! That's the man who used to come and play in my room. And sure enough, there he was, with a bald head and thick rimmed glasses. But then it got even more weird. Thomas pointed at the woman standing next to him and says, and this was Rachel's great-grandmother, his great-grandmother, Rachel's grandmother, and he seemed to recognize her too, even though he'd never seen the picture. And he said this, he says, Mummy, I know this lady too. She used to come to our old flat and stay with us when you had that car crash. Now, it turned out that when Thomas was 20 months old, Rachel was indeed in a serious car accident. It actually almost killed her. But Thomas said that this lady in the picture, her dead grandmother, had come to her bedside to look after her during that time. Rachel said she felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise up. Was Thomas's imaginary friend actually a dead relative? Is that what imaginary friends are? Or are they something else? Or just a figment of the imagination? Well, if you want to find out more about imaginary friends and the spooky world of them, then check out the latest episode of my podcast, Frightful. Or if you want other spooky stuff, just follow me on TikTok, or even on TikTok. Or if you fancy it, you can find my books on Amazon. Thanks.
Okay, so there was a comment that said, oh, so now you're ghosting us. And I swear that is not the case. I've had a really busy day today. And I was glancing at a couple of comments. But this comment, I literally went through all the comments to look for this specific one because this one stood out to me. She says, insane. I definitely believe in all this stuff. And I definitely feel you about visiting her grave now and being a mom with your own kids and bringing stuff back home is real. Protect your bubble. I want to respond to this one because a lot of you are telling me to go visit her grave. I definitely would like to eventually go visit her grave. I don't feel I'm ready for that. And I want to get more prepped and learn more about it and take the right precautions just in case, for the fact that I do have my own kids now. And like I mentioned in my video, do I want my friends to have any imaginary friend? No. Fun fact, my daughter, my firstborn, when she was 3 years old, we lived at an apartment complex and we were on the 4th floor. This is to show you that I don't play with that stuff now. One day I was cleaning, passed by her room, heard her talking to somebody or to herself, and right away I was like, open the door, girl, who you talking to? But yeah, I asked her, hey baby, who you talking to? And she's like, oh, my friend. And she tells me a name. Again, I'm gonna make up a name. She tells me her friend's name is Nia. And I'm like, who's Nia? And she's like, oh, her mama and her dada, they let her come and crawl up our building to talk to me at night. What? Girl, let me tell you, I ran so fast to go get my bottle of holy water because what thing is crawling up to the 4th floor to visit my daughter at night? Nope. Got my holy water, sprayed it all over her room, all over my apartment, said a prayer, said something into the effect, that, things aren't welcome in here. That was the last time that she talked about her friend Nia. But let me tell you, from experience, like I said, I believe my imaginary friend was 100% real, okay? I don't have doubts about that. My daughter, although she didn't talk like if she was still experiencing her, she remembered her name for a couple of years after that. I think after she turned, she was like 3 or 4 at the time. By the time she got to the age of 6, I believe, she didn't remember her name anymore. But yeah, that just goes to show you I don't play with that stuff anymore. So I am afraid of going to visit her grave. She was nice. There's nothing but good stories about her, but still, like I said, I want to be more prepped. Then she says at the end of this comment that it was nice that I included her in everything. This kind of connects to one of the questions that I'm going to answer right after this one. But yes, I did include her in everything. Just the way you see in movies when kids are like, don't sit there, my friend's sitting there. That was me. Those are the stories that my mom has to tell, my dad, my family. But yeah, definitely wanted to get to this comment first. I may not get to answer all the questions that I want to answer tonight because it's 2 o'clock in the morning right now. So what a better time to talk about this than now. But I do have a busy day tomorrow, so if I don't get to a lot of questions today, I will get to them tomorrow or maybe the next day.